Discover the unexpected twist. When the billionaire boss asked her to act like his wife, an incredible journey of sacrifice and ambition, Sarah felt the pressure coiling in her chest, tightening each day like a vice grip around her life. At 28 years old, her role as a paralegal at a top New York City firm consumed her time, leaving little room for anything else, especially her father's steadily declining health back in their small town. The phone calls from the hospital always carried the weight of mountains, and the mounting medical bills loomed like dark clouds overhead. Each time she turned her attention to work, she felt herself drifting further from the family values that had been ingrained in her since childhood. Sacrifice and perseverance weren't just words, they were her lifeline. One afternoon, while sifting through endless legal documents, Michael, the firm's billionaire CEO, approached her, a looming figure of success draped in tailored suits. His public persona stood in stark contrast to the sadness swimming in his eyes. "I need a favor," he said, his voice carrying an urgency that alarmed her. Before she could process, he asked her to impersonate his wife for an upcoming charity gala, an idea that felt both outrageous and oddly tempting. The financial implications could mean stability for her father's care, but stepping into that world felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. As she contemplated his proposition, dread curled in her stomach. She was torn. How could she dance in the lavish world of the elite while her father lay alone in a sterile hospital room, battling his own demons? She felt like a pawn, whispered hopes trapped in the bright, glittering cage of corporate success. Yet, the thought of his treatment going unpaid drove her gut to the point of nausea. Canceling was not an option. She needed to see this through. So, with a deep breath and a resolution of demand, she reluctantly agreed. Days later, dressed in an elegant gown that hugged her curves in a way that felt more foreign than flattering, Sarah entered the ballroom beside Michael. It was a world of opulence, where laughter rang hollow amidst the clinking of champagne glasses. Every glance from the crowd felt like scrutiny, reminding her of the vast gap between their lives. There was tension hovering in the air, stifling her breath. She could barely concentrate as Michael whispered assurances, echoing from his troubled past, his family's relentless expectations drowning him in a sea of their ambition, a mirror of her own struggles. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Their charade unraveled slowly into companionship, illuminated by stolen moments of laughter amidst an indifferent crowd. Yet, just as she began to find solace in this deepening bond, the whispers of the firm turned dark. Someone had uncovered their secret, and it loomed like a storm cloud above her head, threatening everything she held dear. The pressure was mounting, her father's healthcare was in peril, caught in the collateral damage of corporate politics. What would she do? Defend her family and risk the consequences, or challenge the corruption threading through the company, igniting a battle that could destroy both Michael's and her own future? As Sarah's thoughts became a relentless storm, the ticking clock mocked her, pressing her against the wall, leaving her teetering on the brink of an agonizing choice, knowing that every decision echoed not just for her, but for the family she desperately fought to protect, her heart pulsating with the weight of it all. The room buzzed with energy as Sarah navigated the hallway outside the ballroom, half-formed strategies battling in her mind. Each smile she mustered for the other gala guests felt like a layer of paint disguising the cracks beneath her true feelings lurking just out of sight. It was suddenly clear that the facade she wore was less about endorsement and more about survival. Michael's proximity had become both a comfort and a burden. She could see the lines of worry etched on his face, his own struggles mirroring hers. Did he really know what he was asking her to do, or was he merely reacting to pressures that crushed his spirit? The stakes had escalated, more than the charade of their relationship was at risk now, and she was trapped in a game that could cost her everything. The anxiety tumbled through her mind like loose change, impacting her decisions. She had spent years honing her abilities as a paralegal. Her precision and knack for detail had set her apart, but these skills now felt impotent against the tide of corporate ethics being tested before her eyes. The very tools that had empowered her career were now clouded by the chaos unfolding around her. "Sarah," Michael's voice broke through her spiral. She turned, meeting his gaze, which held an unexpected intensity. "Are you okay? You seem distant." "I'm fine," she insisted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Could she trust this man? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I understand that this has become more complicated than we envisioned, but there are things we can control. If necessary, I'll fight for you." Fight for her? Did he not realize that fighting meant pitting herself against the very structure they worked for? The image of her father racked with illness surged to the forefront of her mind, and for a moment, vulnerability threatened to engulf her. "In what sense, Michael?" she challenged, longing for clarity. "Do we really challenge the system? Or do we just play our parts, smile for the cameras, and hope everything resolves itself?" "Perhaps it's time to confront our roles in this system," he replied, a fire igniting in his eyes. "I've built this empire, but I know the cost of ambition. If we push back, we can expose the corruption." Doubt reared its ugly head. Did she have it in her to step onto such a battlefield? Yet the thought of her father suffering away from the familial bonds burned brightly in her mind, urging her forward. She felt a thrum of determination pulse through her. Pushing back could mean losing the comfortable life she had forged in a high-stakes city. But what was comfort when faced with ethical decay? For the first time, she found a flicker of her own bravery. "I'll help you," she declared, swallowing her fear. "But we have to strategize. There's no use rushing in blindly." "Agreed," he nodded, a spark of respect passing between them. "Let us meet tomorrow, away from the office. We need to think ahead." As they parted ways that evening, an electrifying mix of fear and ambition coursed through her veins. Realizing she was no longer just playing a part, but stepping into her power felt intoxicating. Yet beneath the excitement lay the gnawing worry of consequences. As she lay in bed, her father's face swam before her, fragile yet resolute. This was no longer about surviving, it was about fighting for those she loved, demonstrating that even within darkness, a flicker of integrity could ignite a blaze of change. The decision before her was monumental, yet clarity cut through the noise. She would forge ahead into this new chapter, armed with her skills, a budding alliance with Michael, and a determination that ran deep. What they uncovered as they dug deeper could either unravel them both or build something unexpected. The very foundation of their lives stood on the brink of transformation, whispering the promise of danger or hope. If she was going to press on, she had to prioritize her next move. Would she stand her ground and dare to fight, or would the costs be too great to bear? The path ahead felt like a fine line between ambition and ethics, and the choices looming before her had consequences she was only beginning to understand. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped patterns across Sarah's room, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her mind. She tossed and turned, contemplating the weight of her decision to ally with Michael. The stakes had risen, and clarity had replaced comfort as her guiding principle. Would her commitment to integrity hold up against the corporation's merciless machinery? With her heart racing, she forced herself out of bed, determined to craft a strategy for their meeting. She needed a plan, something solid to lay the groundwork for their next steps. She focused on her professional strengths, her meticulous nature, the same attributes that had earned her respect in a gritty corporate world. But now, the skills that brought her success were infused with a new urgency. These would be weapons in the battle for her morality. As she brewed coffee, each drip echoed her organizational thoughts. She decompiled the information they had, weaving together evidence of corruption within the corporation's upper echelons. They would need more than just willpower, they required substance, proof to back their claims when the time came to confront those in power. The more Sarah thought about the information gathering, the more she understood her own limits. There was immense danger in exposing the corrupt practices rampant in their world, and even the minor tasks would require calculated risks. Trust, too, became a critical element not only with Michael but also in assessing who could be potential allies. Her laptop whirred to life, lighting up her cluttered desk. As she sifted through documents from the past few months, she noticed patterns emerging: unusual transactions, conflicts of interest buried in legalese. Each document vividly illuminated the corporate facade that masked an ugly truth. She documented her findings, scrutinizing every detail, but as layers peeled back, doubt trickled in. Would she find the courage to push forward when faced with the inevitable backlash? She reached for her phone, debating whether to share her findings with Michael now or wait till their meeting. The anxiety of indecision gnawed at her. If she initiated a conversation with him, revealing what she'd uncovered, it would only deepen their bond, but she risked overstepping boundaries. Did she have the right to bring him into this world of uncertainty before they had solid grounds for action? An incoming message from Michael disrupted her turmoil, igniting a flurry of emotions. "Can we meet earlier? Got some intel I think we should brainstorm together." The urgency in his text spurred her action. Yes, they needed to form a united front. Her hands trembled slightly as she replied, confirming their rendezvous without fully grasping the implications of what this could herald. Time passed with an unbearable slowness as she prepared. Each item she gathered felt symbolic: her success in the corporate world juxtaposed against the moral dilemmas that now threatened to ensnare her. What if this alliance ended in betrayal or worse? As she approached their predetermined meeting spot later that afternoon, doubt began to wrestle with resolve. What would she say? How would she articulate her findings? Despite having rehearsed her speech hundreds of times during the drive, uncertainty draped itself over her shoulders, heavy like a cloak. Arriving first, she took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. The juxtaposition of the upscale cafe against the turmoil inside her was stark. Glancing at her reflection in the glass, she barely recognized the determined woman staring back. This was more than just professional ambition. This was about integrity, love, and ultimately, survival. She positioned herself at a table at the back, heart thrumming in anticipation. As the door swung open, Michael stepped in, his expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. Their eyes met, and in that instance, a silent agreement passed between them: no more masks. "Let us uncover the truth," she asserted as he took his seat, her voice steady. Yet, another thought lingered like a specter in the back of her mind. Would the truth align them, or would it fracture what they had built together? The foundation beneath them felt compromised, but she was willing to take that risk. They had to know what was at stake was no longer just their careers, it was their very selves. As they leaned into a discussion laden with the promise of revelation, Sarah realized she was no longer merely a paralegal in a gilded cage. She was stepping into the heart of the storm, ready to challenge the very core of their world. But just as clarity broke through their dialogue, a startling message buzzed on her phone. An unexpected text from a colleague she hadn't spoken to in months. "I have something important to tell you about the firm, you need to hear this." The fabric of her precarious strategy shifted, and the path they had chosen stood upon a new precipice, one that not only carried the weight of their ambitions but now threatened to expose everything they thought they knew. What truth would unravel next? Her heart raced as she stared at the message, an electrifying mix of dread and excitement coursing through her veins. What more could she learn that would shift the dynamics of her growing alliance with Michael? The prospect of unearthing new information was thrilling, yet the uncertainty of its implications weighed heavily on her mind. "Do you think this could help us?" Michael inquired, breaking her train of thought with a hopeful glance. She had almost forgotten he was there, his presence a comforting anchor amid the storm of her mental chaos. His question lingered in the air like an unopened gift. Could this new lead turn the tide? Yet lurking beneath her eagerness was trepidation. "I don't know. I only know it sounds urgent," Sarah confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. Michael leaned back in his chair, assessing her with a keen gaze. We need all the intel we can get. Let us meet with whoever sent you that message as soon as possible. The clarity in his tone reignited her resolve. She nodded, tightening her grip on her phone. As they departed the cafe, the world outside felt disjointed, a symphony of bustling pedestrians and honking cars, yet she moved in a bubble of focus. With each step toward the office, her resolve solidified. They were unearthing something potentially dangerous, and now, the stakes had been raised even higher. Once inside the office, Sarah felt a familiar tension seeping into her bones. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, amplifying her nerves. Instead of getting lost in corporate chatter, her mind focused on piecing together the puzzle. Who could this colleague be, and what did they know? The clock ticked down the minutes as she waited near her desk, Michael pacing beside her, studying their colleague's whereabouts. Each heartbeat echoed the urgency of the moment they had to forge ahead before the firm's proverbial walls closed in on them. When the office door swung open, a figure stepped inside, an unexpected glimmer of familiarity in the face of a fellow paralegal, Jenna. Sarah hadn't spoken to her in ages. The last time they had met was under fleeting circumstances, sharing glances and passing comments over stacks of briefs. Sarah, Michael, Jenna greeted them, an urgency evident in her voice. We need to talk. I overheard something in the break room that you should know. They quickly gathered in a conference room, Sarah's heart thrumming with equal parts dread and hope. What Jenna shared within those four walls blurred the lines between resignation and resilience. She spoke of transactions hidden under layers of deception, executives leveraging positions for personal gain. The very ropes they hoped to uncoil were entangled deeper than any of them had anticipated. Something is brewing, Jenna said, eyes darting between them. If you're planning to expose this, think hard about what you want to risk. I've seen people who tried to cross our upper management end up with far worse than job loss. A heavy silence ensued, and Sarah's mind flashed with images of her life dismantling piece by piece should they expose the corruption. Could she endure that backlash, especially now with Michael's future intertwined with her own? Right now, we need to be strategic, Sarah asserted, her voice gathering strength. If we push this forward, we can't just throw evidence blindly. We need to assemble a solid plan first. Michael nodded. Agreed. But we need to move quickly. There's no telling how long Jenna's leaks will remain unnoticed. As the three strategized among themselves, plotting timelines, consequences, and the potential fallout, Sarah felt a surge of confidence grow. The path ahead was fraught with unimaginable risks, yet galvanized by their shared purpose, an undeniable camaraderie began to form. When their conversation concluded, Jenna stood to leave, casting a look of cautious optimism. Just remember, the road ahead isn't safe. It's going to take everything you have. Just as Jenna stepped out, Sarah's phone vibrated again. Another message flashed across the screen. This time, it was from her supervisor, and the content was unsettling. We need to meet regarding your recent work. It's urgent. As she read the message, a chill settled in the pit of her stomach. What truth lay behind that urgency? The stakes were escalating, and as she exchanged a glance with Michael, a profound realization hit. This was not just about uncovering corruption anymore, it was a full-blown confrontation against the very foundation of their professional lives. Uncertainty loomed over them like a dark cloud, and Sarah knew one thing: answering that call could lead her into uncharted territory where every decision would matter more than ever before. Are we ready for this? She whispered, doubts creeping back in. As anticipation enveloped them, the pressure mounted, propelling Sarah toward an inevitable confrontation she wasn't sure she was ready for. What lay behind the door of that meeting, and would it tear apart the delicate network they had just begun to weave together? Navigating the maze of her thoughts, Sarah felt her heart pound in sync with the relentless ticking of the office clock. The message from her supervisor loomed large, intensifying the conflict inside her. She could sense Michael's concerned gaze lingering on her, urging her to act. But what if this meeting was merely a precursor to an even deeper entanglement with the firm's darker dealings? Are you going to respond? Michael asked, his voice breaking the tension. I have to, she replied, steeling herself. I can't ignore this. The words felt both empowering and terrifying. What awaited her could be either a lifeline or a loaded trap. Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as she sent a brief confirmation to her supervisor. The reply was instant, good. My office in 5 minutes. She felt as if she were preparing for battle, the implications of her next steps weighing heavily on her. With a fleeting glance toward Michael, who offered her a small, reassuring nod, she stepped into the corridor, each footfall echoing her mounting anxiety. Inside her supervisor's office, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Mark, her supervisor, was seated, his demeanor inscrutable, the shadows of the room accentuating the worry in her chest. Thank you for coming in, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled. Though his calm exterior suggested control, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of a precipice. I'm here to discuss my recent work, she began, striving for clarity and confidence. Is there an issue? He smirked, almost disarmingly. Oh, not an issue. More of an opportunity. A pause. You've shown remarkable initiative recently, Sarah. You've caught the eye of senior management. Her heart raced wildly. This could be good or it could be a dangerous ploy. What do you mean? She inquired, trying to cloak her growing apprehension with curiosity. We need someone trustworthy to handle a sensitive matter. You have the potential to shine, but he leaned forward, his intensity making her squirm. To succeed, you need to operate discreetly and keep your alliances very close. The implications hit her like a cold wave. It wasn't just her work on the line, it was everything she had built since joining the firm. What exactly are you asking me to do? Certain higher-ups are facing scrutiny, and they need someone in their corner, someone they trust, he replied, his gaze piercing into hers. I'd like you to assist during the upcoming board meeting and act as a liaison for strategy proposals. Act as a liaison? In what way? Each word felt more loaded than the last. The idea of being collateral in an executive power play was not what she had bargained for. Gather information, facilitate discussions, perhaps even help with a few, he hesitated, choosing words carefully, creative strategies to present our objectives favorably. Disbelief swirled within her. This wasn't mere support, this was a request to mislead, to tangle herself deeper within the firm's corruption. Yet part of her, the part seeking validation and respect, was tempted. She could be a part of the very strategies she opposed. The air thickened with tension, and a decision was stretched before her. Could she leverage this opportunity to expose the truth, or would it lead her unduly into a web of deceit? After a pause that felt like an eternity, Sarah's voice cut through the silence, laced with determination. I need time to think about it. Mark studied her reaction, a sly smile creeping onto his face. Just remember, opportunities like this don't wait for anyone, they demand swift action. As she left Mark's office, her heart raced with the weight of decision. The stakes felt higher than ever, and with each step toward her desk, she felt a sudden wave of clarity wash over her. Sarah needed to become adept at navigating the very terrain she was trying to disrupt. The potential for knowledge and strategy was within reach, and the fear of stepping into her supervisor's world interacted with her burgeoning resolve to expose the truth. Back at her desk, Michael awaited, confusion written across his features. What did he want? Her response lingered on her lips, a storm of conflicting thoughts swirling within. Could she regain control of the narrative, or would it consume her? An opportunity, she replied, pausing deliberately. But it might be a path swathed in shadows. As they exchanged looks, Sarah realized one crucial truth: she was on the brink of a self-discovery that would challenge her values and skills beyond what she had ever imagined. And just as the reality of her choices settled in, another message buzzed her phone, sending icy tendrils of unease through her. "Meet me at the usual spot." "It's urgent," the text read. The familiar pang of urgency gripped her once more. What tangled faction awaited her this time, and how deep did this rabbit hole go? Steeling herself against the uncertainty, Sarah slipped her phone back into her pocket and glanced at Michael. "I need to take care of something," she said, brushing past his worried expression, her mind racing. Outside, the sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the pavement. It mirrored her internal conflict, light and dark, clarity and confusion. The usual spot was a cafe a few blocks away, a place filled with chatter and warmth, yet today, it felt charged with tension. Arriving, she spotted Lucas, a colleague she had once considered a friend. His face was drawn, an urgency creasing his brow that deepened her unease. As she approached him, she attempted to gauge his mood, expecting a simple meeting over coffee. But the gravity in his eyes told her otherwise. "Sarah," he greeted her softly, a hint of caution in his voice. "I'm glad you came. We need to talk about what's really happening inside the firm." Her heart raced. Lucas had always been the cautious type, often hesitant to stir the pot. If he was seeking her out with such urgency, it had to be serious. "What is it?" "Mark's been making moves. Rumors are swirling among some of the senior partners," Lucas began, glancing around as if to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "They're discussing a realignment, and it's not just about strategic planning." "What do you mean?" She leaned in, wanting to capture every word, anxious for answers. "They're consolidating their power." "That opportunity Mark offered?" "It's a trap, one that'll entangle you and others in their agenda," he continued, his voice low. "I think it's about supplanting key people, not just fulfilling roles. If you align too closely with them, you could be taking a step that leads to your downfall." His words struck her like a slap, igniting the internal struggle. The allure of climbing the corporate ladder clashed violently with her values. Did she really want to be a part of that system, even if it meant risking everything she believed in? "So what should I do?" The question escaped her, laced with desperation. "Distance yourself. You're too valuable to be consumed by their politics. Speak to others, build a network that's independent from them. You can create a shift, you just have to be willing to stand alone," he urged, his eyes earnest. Sarah felt the weight of his proposal settle heavily on her shoulders. Distancing herself from the core of the firm sounded like an impossible task. It threatened everything she had worked for, yet the notion of self-preservation resonated deeply. "What if it backfires? What if I lose everything?" she questioned, her voice tinged with fear. "You might temporarily. But sometimes, losing everything is the only way to gain yourself back," Lucas suggested. It was strange hearing him speak with such fervor. Clarity emerged from the chaos. This was an opportunity not just to navigate the treacherous waters of her workplace, but to redefine her involvement with the firm. It would mean taking risks, but was she ready to embrace the uncertainty? As she processed his words, a familiar notification chimed on her phone, another message from Mark. "The board meeting is next week. Let's discuss your role. Don't leave me hanging, Sarah." Her thoughts spiraled. Was she truly prepared to turn her back on that opportunity, or could she position herself to exploit it while still remaining true to her principles? "Thank you, Lucas. I need to think this through," she finally replied, her mind racing but resolute. As she turned away from the cafe, a new plan started to form in her mind. She had to gather allies, to forge connections that could either fortify her standing or expose the corrupt veins running through the heart of the firm. With each step she took, a new sense of purpose ignited within her. The decision loomed, and the stakes were higher than ever. Reaching her desk, she quickly typed out a message to Michael, asking for a meeting later that evening. She knew she needed to rally a coalition of those who could help her navigate this corporate minefield. But just as she hit send, a shadow fell across her workspace. Looking up, she found Mark standing before her. The cool smirk on his face sent chills through her. "Ready to chat about your future?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. A leaden weight settled in her stomach. Was this the moment she would either silence her conscience or ignite a rebellion? Caught at the crossroads of choices, Sarah realized the time for indecision was fading. The moment for truth and confrontation was at hand. Would she dare to face him directly, or would she continue playing the game he had set before her? Whatever choice she made next would be critical, and the world around her trembled with anticipation. Mark's presence loomed over her, casting a shadow that felt heavier than the one in her workspace. The cool smile he wore seemed to mock her rising resistance, and a knot tangled in her stomach. Was this really the time for his games? The attack she had anticipated was not from without, but from the very core of the firm. The figure whose ambition she had brushed against, now turned predator. "Of course, Mark," Sarah replied, steadying her voice despite the roiling emotions inside. "What did you want to discuss?" "We both know the board meeting is upon us," he said, settling into the chair opposite her, disdain threading through the casualness he aimed to convey. "Your recent accolades have not gone unnoticed. Your trajectory is impressive." In that moment, Sarah felt the aura of manipulation wrap around her. Was he flattering her to gather her closer? Could their shared history blind her to the careful deception at play? Isn't it true that the real question lies in how you intend to capitalize on this newfound traction? He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, assessing her reactions. "The partners are looking for strong leaders, and you have the potential to be that leader." A flicker of temptation ignited within her. The prospect of power, of being recognized as key to the firm's future, was heady. But Lucas' warning echoed in her mind: was this just a ruse? The prospect of rising through the ranks while staying true to her principles was slipping further away. "I appreciate your confidence in my abilities, Mark," she replied coolly, trying to mask the inner turmoil that was starting to surface. "But leadership isn't just about ambition or numbers. It's about integrity, aligning values with action." He chuckled softly, a dismissive gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. "Ah, integrity. A noble ideal, but let us not kid ourselves, it doesn't feed the family or ensure the success of your career. You must learn to navigate the complexities of capitalism if you want to thrive." His words sharpened her doubts, and she felt the fight brewing within her. Was she willing to concede her values for success defined by someone else? Could she redefine what integrity looked like in the face of a cutthroat system? "Success means different things to different people, Mark. I'm not convinced your definition aligns with mine," Sarah replied, her voice holding more conviction as she leaned back in her chair. His expression darkened momentarily, eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite decipher. "Fine, but let us talk about your future. I can help you achieve a position of real influence within the firm. Imagine what we could do together, not just as colleagues, but as partners in something greater." "Partners?" The word lingered in the air, heavy with implications. "What do you mean by that? I'm not interested in playing those games." His smile returned, colder than before. "Let us not dance around it, Sarah. You know the dynamics at play. Think about it: if you agree to join me in a united front, you could be on the fast track to the top. All I need is for you to act as my ally, my wife, in a figurative sense, sharing in the glory of our potential rise." 1,000 thoughts flooded Sarah's mind. The invitation was layered with promises and threats, she could see it clearly now. It was a dangerous proposition, yet she felt the pull of ambition. But was the price worth her soul? "Mark, I'm not a pawn in your game," she insisted, steel threading into her voice as conviction solidified into a resolve. "I won't sacrifice who I am for a moment's power." His gaze sharpened, disappointment mingling with anger feral beneath his facade. "Then you might want to reevaluate your priorities. Success in this business isn't about ideals, it's about power plays. Aligning with me isn't just beneficial, it's essential if you want to survive." As he stood, leaving a tangible tension in the air, Sarah knew she was on the dangerous precipice of a decision that could shape her future forever. With her heart racing, she contemplated her options. Retreating into the shadows Mark offered, or stepping into the light of her own creation. The choice swirled like a storm in her mind. In that moment of clarity, she recognized that embracing her own vision might lead her down a lonely path. Nonetheless, she had to remind herself that strength meant not merely surviving, but thriving by her own standards. And just as a vital realization struck her, her phone buzzed again. A message from Michael. I have information that might change everything. Can we meet sooner? Would time grant her the clarity she sought, or would the winds of ambition sweep her into the darkness of compromise? The way forward was riddled with uncertainty, but she could no longer shrink from its pull. With each step she took toward her own beliefs, a feisty determination flared within. There would be no looking back. She would gather the power, not stand by as it was wielded over her. And as her resolve echoed louder than the rumbles of doubt, her next moves felt clearer than they had in days. She was ready to ignite a revolt, but first, she needed to confront the depth of her own potential. Would Michael's insights force her hand to act decisively, or would they lead to deeper entanglements that would reshape her path altogether? With her pulse quickening, Sarah composed herself, forcing her mind back to the message flashing on her screen. Michael's request echoed in her thoughts, a siren song drawing her into the tumultuous sea of uncertainty. She had always trusted his instincts, a refuge in the professionalism they shared. But now, the stakes felt perilously high. She glanced at the clock. The board meeting loomed just hours away. Time was a luxury she couldn't afford. With a competitive edge nudging her to strategize, she grabbed her notebook and began jotting down her current analysis of the firm's landscape, paying particular attention to the strengths of her position while acknowledging the weaknesses Mark had hinted at. The firm had shifted closer to aggressive expansion, steering away from its traditional values. Sarah had always highlighted the importance of integrity and ethical dealings in her proposals. Now, she needed to find a way to leverage that authenticity instead of compromising it. As she scribbled her thoughts, patterns began to emerge. There was a series of recent client acquisitions that had come about due to ethically questionable negotiations. If she could obtain proof, this could be her leverage against not only Mark but the current leadership's direction. However, this shift in her approach also required navigating a slippery slope. Associating her integrity with allegations could be risky. What if her intentions were misread as mere jealousy or ambition? In a flash of resolve, she texted Michael, asking for an immediate meeting at a nearby cafe, a half-step away from the firm's walls. She needed the clarity of his counsel, the grounding perspective he always offered, especially now when confusion tangled with ambition. As she rearranged her workspace, Sarah pondered the complexities of her motivations. What if the drive for empowerment was rooted in fear of being overshadowed, fear of disappearing into the background? Initially, those questions had plagued her. However, she started to realize that facing those fears could unlock a deeper understanding of her capabilities. The cafe was bathed in soft afternoon light, and as Michael walked in, his presence cut through the noise. He presented an aura of authenticity that Sarah had always admired. She beckoned him to a quiet corner, eager to discuss the channels leading to effective, ethical solutions within the maelstrom of corporate ambition. "Thanks for coming," she began, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "I think the time for subtlety is over. I'm considering a more confrontational strategy against Mark and the board's leadership." Michael sat back, intrigued, concealing his surprise. "What led you to this conclusion? You've always been the conscientious type. You valued integrity above contest." "That's exactly why I think it's time to shake things up. I see the firm veering towards tactics that undermine our fundamentals. My recognition has only made me a target for coercion. I need to retain my values while strategically positioning myself." He nodded. "And what do you think Mark's ambitions really are? Is it merely a power play, or is there something deeper at stake?" The question ricocheted in her mind. She hadn't yet allowed herself to wrap her thoughts around that idea. His approach feels threatening, but it could also be an opportunity to expose how misaligned our values have become. If I can position myself as a beacon of ethical leadership, the partners may see my vision as essential. But at what cost? Michael challenged gently. Are you prepared for the fallout if your rise stirs the pot too aggressively? You could isolate allies or create enemies. The darkness of that possibility settled on her shoulders, heavier than before. I'm aware of that, but if I don't act, I risk losing everything I've worked for, and worse, losing myself in the process. Michael regarded her thoughtfully. Leverage your position then, Sarah, but only keep in mind the influence you want. Align yourself with those who share your vision. Use their clout to introduce the discussions. On ethics before the meeting. Pondering his words, she felt a shift within her. Her move toward assertiveness embraced her values, turning potential conflict into a battleground she could navigate. But victory could only mean more than just survival. It had to be about shaping the future she craved. As they wrapped up, Sarah felt like she was slowly emerging from the murky water, gaining footing on uncertain ground. There were still many obstacles ahead. Mark was cunning and relentless, but her desire to lead with integrity invigorated her. The meeting could be the defining moment she had been looking for, a chance to assert the value of her vision amidst the ethical disarray of the firm. But would her courageous leap be met with applause or retaliation? With a newfound sense of purpose tightening in her chest, she prepared herself to confront Mark, the board, and her future, a future that threatened to shatter her resolve while simultaneously promising the liberation she craved. As she left the cafe, her phone buzzed again. A message from Lucas: "We need to handle this before it gets out of control. Meet me before the board meeting." Could she trust him, or was this yet another thread weaving deeper into the web of deception surrounding her? The relentless rhythm of Sarah's heart thrummed against her chest as she walked back to the office, each step amplifying the cacophony of thoughts swirling in her mind. Lucas. As much as she wanted to dismiss his message, his tonality hinted at urgency, perhaps even desperation. What did he know that she didn't? She wrestled with the decision. Trust was a fragile thing in the corporate world, and Lucas had always possessed an enigmatic aura. It was hard to gauge his allegiances. Once at her desk, she quickly drafted a reply to Lucas, suggesting they meet in the firm's designated meeting room. It was slightly more secure than the nearby cafe, away from prying eyes. The idea of spending time with him brought back mixed memories, flickers of camaraderie and rivalry that had accompanied their tumultuous interactions. There had been moments when he seemed genuinely supportive, only to turn around and undermine her. Time seemed to warp as she awaited Lucas, seconds stretching into minutes. She filed away her thoughts, focusing instead on the strategy she would present during the board meeting. She needed to articulate a compelling vision that countered the current leadership's aggressive methods while anchoring her stance on ethical practices. It was more than just a presentation, it was her risk to reshape her identity within the firm. When Lucas finally entered the room, his demeanor was unreadable. He wore an expression of calculated nonchalance, but Sarah sensed an underlying tension. "Thanks for meeting me," he started, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "I would have come sooner, but there was quite a bit to handle." She eyed him directly. "What is going on?" "I got the sense that something urgent needed addressing before the meeting." Lucas shifted his weight, glancing away abruptly. "It's about Mark and what he is planning. I've heard whispers that he aims to consolidate power and push out anyone who stands in his way, including you," he said, carefully watching her reaction. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and a tight knot formed in her stomach. "Do you have proof?" The gravity of his words permeated through her defenses. "Not yet, but I can dig deeper. We need to align before the board meeting. If we're going to counter Mark, it needs to be united front. You have the technical know-how, and I have connections," he said, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "Why now?" Sarah crossed her arms, skepticism lingering. What's in it for you? I've seen your approach before, Lucas, and I won't fall for your games again. This is different. I need to protect my interests as well. You and we're better together than against each other, he replied, his eyes narrowing with earnest intent. Trust me, it's crucial we don't allow Mark to gain the upper hand. Caught in a whirlpool of doubt, Sarah felt her internal compass spinning wildly. Lucas's past maneuvering had taught her to tread lightly, yet his sudden request for partnership shifted the notion from conflict to potential collaboration. It was disorienting. Realigning her understanding of him was akin to treading in murky waters. Fine, she finally said, her resolve crystallizing amidst the apprehension. I'll consider this alliance, but let us keep things transparent. I need to know you're committed to this no hidden agenda. A ghost of a smile crossed Lucas's face. That's all I ask for, Sarah. Together, we'll expose Mark's methods. It won't just safeguard your future, it will shift the power dynamics we're currently facing. As they began formulating a plan, her heart raced. Despite her reservations, the flicker of possibilities surged through her, a better future, not just for herself but for the integrity of the firm. Holding each other accountable would tilt the odds in her favor, but trust would be the linchpin. Leaving the meeting room, Sarah felt empowered yet wary. The path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, the specter of Mark still lurking in the shadows of her thoughts. She had set the course toward a possible transformation of her career, but would they manage to coalesce effectively against their common antagonist? On the cusp of her conflict, a new message from Michael lit up her phone. I just heard about Lucas, be cautious. The stakes were rising fast, and her resolve would soon be tested once again. Who could she truly rely on? Would putting her faith in Lucas open new doors or seal her fate? The boardroom buzzed with anticipation, an electric atmosphere radiating through the polished wood and sleek glass. As she took her seat at the table, Sarah felt her heart race, a collision of determination and apprehension stirring within her. Today was not just about a presentation, it was the culmination of all her efforts, all her courage transforming into a battle for integrity against the tide of corporate greed. Last week's alliance with Lucas weighed heavily on her mind. Though they had crafted a solid plan to counter Mark's ambitions, the question of trust loomed over her like a dark shadow. Could she rely on him to act in her best interest? In a world where every decision could alter the course of her career, the stakes couldn't be higher. Yet as she glanced around the table, locking eyes with Michael, who flashed her an encouraging smile, clarity surged through her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was advocating for a vision of the firm she believed in. The gap between who she had been and who she was becoming stretched wider, the tension palpable as the executives took their places. When Mark entered, a palpable chill spread through the room. Long strides and an effortless arrogance defined his presence, and with each passing second, the stakes felt even more pronounced. The presentation slides outlined her vision, framed in ethical practices and fair dealings, and as she prepared to speak, she planted her feet firmly in her newfound conviction. Thank you, everyone, for gathering here today, Sarah began, her voice unwavering. Today, we stand at a crossroads as a firm, facing pivotal decisions, a chance to align our true principles with our actions. Each word flowed smoothly, woven with passion and purpose. She recounted the value of transparency, sounding the call for integrity forged from competence, igniting flickers of hope in the room. Her colleagues leaned forward, captivated by her passion for ethics and genuine desire to realign the company's mission. Then, with purpose, she pivoted. However, recent decisions have raised red flags, a departure from our founding values. It is time we confront the practices undermining our dynamics. The ripple effects from her statements were immediate. Glancing at Mark, she noted the shift in his demeanor, the previously confident man now exuding discomfort. What we need is fresh perspectives, not entrenched methods derived solely from power plays, she continued, bolstered by Michael's approving nod. Mark's face hardened, but she pressed on, feeling the tide turn. We can either push for aggressive expansion at the cost of our integrity or chart a path that ensures both profitability and ethical practices. The latter will not only safeguard our legacy but attract clients motivated by shared values." The silence in the room felt monumental, the gravity of her words sinking in. Then, from the back, a hand shot up, one of the senior partners. "Sarah, are you implying that our current strategies are misaligned? What's your evidence?" Without hesitation, her strategic preparation bore fruit. "I've compiled data illustrating concerning trends correlating with recent client acquisitions and questionable negotiations. This isn't merely speculation, this is our future we're discussing." A murmur wound through the room, curiosity and apprehension mingling again. Tension crackled like static electricity as she gestured toward a pivotal slide, showcasing her findings. The documentation she had painstakingly compiled surfaced in cracks, revealing the unethical practices she had detected. Mark's sharp breath transformed into a dismissive scoff, but even he was unable to suppress the unease that gripped him. "You're suggesting a conspiracy, Sarah. Where is this data coming from?" "Data that can be verified, Mark," she countered firmly. "Rather than burying our heads in the sands of ambition, let us elevate accountability. We owe it to ourselves and this firm." As the room digested her words, Sarah felt a sense of power coursing through her. No longer did she feel the weight of being a pawn. She had become a force to be reckoned with, showing everyone including herself that her voice had the potential to incite change. Moments later, as the meeting progressed, Mark decided to pivot the discussion back toward his original agenda. However, the tide had shifted irreversibly. Her colleagues felt emboldened to engage, to voice concerns about the firm's practices, exploring alternatives directed toward ethical growth. In that instant, Sarah realized she had not only harnessed her professional capacity but also discovered her own descent into leadership. By tactfully presenting her case, she demonstrated that trust, courage, and ambition could coexist, issuing a challenge to Mark and the corporate world she inhabited. As the board meeting adjourned and the executives dispersed, Michael approached her, pride glinting in his eyes. "You were incredible. You stood your ground and sparked a real conversation." Sarah smiled, a solid confidence fortifying her. "We're not out of the woods yet, but I think we've made a substantial advancement." "Exactly," he affirmed. "And you've proven that speaking up leads to collective change." With each step away from the boardroom, Sarah felt an intense sense of fulfillment. She had faced her fears, embraced her values, and redefined her path. For once, the voice of the firm's ambitious machinations became a battle cry for integrity. Months later, basking in her new role as a strategic leader in ethics, Sarah stood at the forefront of a movement rooted in reforming the corporate culture. Celebrated and recognized, she led a team advocating for transparency within the firm, earning respect and empowerment unheard of during her previous years as a mere paralegal. And as she looked toward a future bright with promise, she felt complete. She had proven that ambition could exist without sacrificing values, demonstrating unequivocally that sometimes aligning oneself with truth inevitably paves the way for profound personal achievement. It was a journey forged through sacrifice, growth, and courage, one that led not only to professional recognition but reaffirmed her familial bonds, empowering her father's healthcare choices back home. Sarah had transcended the limitations of her past, reshaped her narrative, and carved her destiny in a landscape once dominated by deceit. Today she stood proud, heralding with deep satisfaction the triumph of her individual journey. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these impactful stories coming. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's transformation. Let's hear your thoughts. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.